Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister, Conservative at Stockton West, Matt Vickers. A very good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon, Jeremy. All good, all good.
I'm raging today. I seem to have been raging for weeks. I'll start with the number one story, my friend. I'd love you and your party's response. Sara Sharif, 43, today, having been convicted of the murder of that sweet 10-year-old last week. A minimum of 40 years in prison. Apparently the rules say that he couldn't get whole life. The rules need changing. The wife, she got 33 years, an uncle as well. I don't think anybody who heard those stories of what he did, 70 injuries, 25 fractures, 10 years of hell, at the hands of a man who was known to be violent towards children and women. As the Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister, take that hat off and talk to me. I don't know if... Are you a father?
I'm not.
Right. Tell me, in basic terms, how we as a society should or would have to pay for that piece of crap to live for 40 years. How does that... and I'm being completely serious, a lot of people disagree with me. Where are you on this? Why is he allowed to even rot in a cell for 40 years after what he did to that kid?
I mean, when you see what was done, like, it just violent, but it wasn't even just abuse, it was actual torture. She was beaten, burnt, bitten. It was just horrendous. And you know what? The bizarre thing is that in society, you just don't think there are people out there who could do that to another person, let alone a beautiful child. Like, it's bizarre to think there are people walking the streets who could go and do such a thing. And it's A, abhorrent on those individuals, but B, the fact that we let this youngster down as a society. You know, we heard about the fact this youngster had been in foster care. We know that the police are aware, that the local council's children's services were aware, that the primary school were aware, you know, all had concerns, and somehow this still happens. It's damning on society as a whole that this can happen on our streets in this country. It makes you sick.
And that, I think that's my point. That's why I got so angry last week, Matt, because I get the argument that people will say you can't... Why would you be advocating him losing his life because then you'll know better? But you said it at the beginning. If we as a society accept there are people who will break the law, when you hear of such a heinous crime, I don't think he deserves any liberty. And then you talk about social services, and you're right. I mean, this is what turned my stomach last week. They were sent recordings of the blood-curdling screams coming from the house. They did nothing. And then I had some man on from social services in another part of the area that had been the boss for years, and he said, well, I mean, if you're going to criticise people trying to do their job under terrible circumstances, having been cut back by 14 years of Tory rule, nobody will be on the pitch. And I found myself shouting, going... It doesn't matter whether you've got any money or not. You must have a brain cell in your head to think, my God, that poor kid, I could have stopped that.
Well, the mistake we make is we're referring to these parents and step-parents as people, as human beings. They're not, they're animals. Like, to treat a child like that is feral, it's vile, it's not human behaviour, it's not behaviour of people. These people are animals. And actually, we have these services in place to protect them. There has to be lessons learned. You can't sit there and go, well, we didn't have enough money and we didn't have enough bodies to solve it. You've got to get to the bottom of where this went wrong, and it did go wrong. Whatever is put in place, there's no point in these organisations existing if they cannot deal with this and we cannot learn the lessons to make sure it never, ever happens again.
Do you think that people... I mean, just an opinion from you and your party. Do you think that people should be held to account? I mean, we're now talking about the post office scandal could result in a whole series of people being investigated and potentially prosecuted, even politicians, in my humble opinion. And I said it last week, and people were like, whoa, social services have blood on their hands. I don't give a damn if that upsets people. In my opinion, not Talk's, mine, they have blood on their hands. Hers, that poor little girl's.
I think, do you know what? These people are professionals. Do you know what? They do a damn tough job, many of these social workers, actually, in really difficult circumstances.
I get that, but not in this case. They also have a huge
responsibility, and they've got to get it right. They have a huge responsibility, and when it goes wrong, we do have to get to the bottom of it. People do have to be held to account, and we have to... I mean, it went wrong. It did not work. Whatever they're doing was not done. They did not comply with that job of protecting this young person in these horrible, horrible circumstances, and people have to account for that and have to answer for it.
I'm going to get on to Brussels at the end because you'll just go off on one and I can be very quiet. In terms of crime, policing and fire, two stories that grabbed me today, and I'd love your take on this. The man who sent child abuse images to Hugh Edwards, has today been spared jail. Jack Davis, without the K, will avoid prison to achieve parity with the disgraced BBC presenter, as he was stood there accused of downloading 84 of the worst images of young children, some on video. I'm not even going there. His defence lawyer said, well, Mr. Edwards got off and so should my client. Matt Vickers, we are now living in a country that says that a woman who puts up on Facebook something that somebody finds offensive, who I would have thought would be a perfect example for rehabilitation in the community, with the Muslim community, this is where you got it wrong, this is offensive and wrong. She goes to jail and Hugh Edwards and his little pedo friends can walk around our society. What does that tell us again?
It is bizarre, it's sick, and the world has, well, the world's been put on its head, hasn't it, in terms of justice, when you see some of these cases and the situation with Hugh Edwards and his chums and what they got. I mean, it's just sick, absolutely sick, but it all falls into, you know, when we don't correct this behaviour, that's how we end up with the last story we were talking about, and how we end up with individuals who are just hell-bent, twisted, evil monsters. But if we don't...
What message does it send? It sends the message that you can look at abusive images of young children as young as 5 and 6 and walk free. And yet you can't say what you feel without offending somebody's feelings in many instances. That's where it goes wrong, surely.
Yeah. And there's a huge counter... there's another unintended consequence of this mess, of these ridiculous misjustices, is that you end up with people question the police when they come around to investigate something, instead of assuming that justice is going to get it right. The police are always going to get it right. They start questioning everything that we do to actually uphold the law, and the people on the front line who work hard, put themselves in harm's way, suffer the consequences as a result. When we question the rights and wrongs of the justice system, it has all sorts of consequences.
I mean, there is so much wrong with this country, and today we picked another story, actually, I have to say, and as the police and fire minister, I'd love your take on this. You just said those on the front line. I absolutely accept, and I'm sick and tired of hearing there aren't enough police, men and women, but I do believe that ideology has got in the way with good old-fashioned police keeping. A fed-up shopkeeper, this is Martin Gaunt, who was on the show, 40 minutes ago, runs a gift shop in Truro, has had to make 50 citizens' arrests against aggressive thieves in the last 2 years because the police, and we all know, and you lot, let's be honest, this isn't Starmer, this has been going on for years, anything less than 200 quid being nicked and they don't turn up. That's appalling.
That isn't true. It is
in Truro.
The £200 idea that people don't get convicted for less than £200 is not true, actually. You will not find a police force who say we don't take cases of people under £200.
Then why don't they turn up? Why does this man have to make 50 citizens' arrests? That's the question, right?
I'll go back to that because that is a biggie. So I don't know whether you know my history on retail workers and assaults on retail workers, but I ran the APPG on retail. I used to work in retail. I used to do, get some of this abuse on the shop floor. It's worse now than it's ever been. And in my early days as an MP, I ran a rebellion against my own government, trying to toughen up sentencing around assaults on retail workers. And we got there in the end. It became a statutory aggravating offence. We now, just before the election, we were bringing forward a measure that would make it a standalone offence. If you assault someone who provides a service to the public in a public setting, like a retail worker, because the thing is, retail workers aren't getting assaulted because they're retail workers. They're getting assaulted because they uphold the rules. They have a statutory duty to not sell under 18s booze, to not sell people under a certain age, all sorts of products, knives, all sorts of things. And it's when they do that, or when they fight to uphold the law of people who are nicking, that's when they get hurt. Not because they've got a Tesco uniform or an M&S uniform, but because they're upholding the rules that we tell them to uphold. But the problem is that because retail crime is so frequent, there is an acceptance. It's a low-level crime, the police think, in many cases. Some forces much better at dealing with it than others.
But surely that's the point, isn't it? And the guy said it to me, Martin Gaunt. He's got 3 big sons. He's made 50 citizens' arrests until the police come. And in fact, the police, he said, I thought was very, very, very interesting. They say thank you and arrest them. They imply we haven't got the time. By the time you call the shop, the person's gone, etc., right? But surely what I'm trying to say to you badly is, if the punishment was more severe, If there were more police on in the community, on the streets, getting intel, finding out who these I can't even say the word, buckets are, and doing something about it, would that not spread a message amongst the criminal fraternity? That's my point. It's almost as if, and listening to Martin Gaunt was really interesting, it's acceptable now. Go and nick a few things because the police ain't going to turn up. I wouldn't go to the Piranha gift shop because he and his sons might grab hold of us, but that one over there, they don't do anything because it doesn't matter. That's the beginning of anarchy, isn't it?
I think the first step is to get the police to react.
Yeah.
Consistently. So some police forces are really reactive. Some police forces, I've spoken to people in my own patch who've rang the police several times. They don't turn up and it's like, well, what we're going to do? We just let them twat the stuff and see what comes about. But then the other problem you've got is that element of society of absolute scumbag, people who are just, they steal all day long from anybody in any way possible to feed a drug addiction and have no outlet. So we put them in prison for a little while and then we get them back out and all of a sudden we put them in a place where they're surrounded by other drug addicts who spend the days twacking and stealing and doing horrendous things to people. And the circle goes on.
What do you and your party, how would you deal with Martin Gaunt in Plymouth, in Cornwall, in Truro? This is his shop, this is his livelihood, and he has to take the law into his own hands because there's not enough police to protect his living. What would your party do?
I think so. I was speaking actually to someone from the College of Policing a couple of hours ago about where they think it works and where they think it doesn't work, and what they think it's about problem solving. So it's not about the police just turning up and banging them up. It's about the police identifying the people, identifying the cause, and going back over till you actually work out how you either fix somebody or knock the hell out of them with consequences that deters them. And it's about that individual case, looking at why those people are doing what they're doing and solving it one way or the other with really tough consequences or not. But it's about making people... The top and bottom of it is, if you are in a shop and you are working on the front, whether that's the youngster having their first job or the pensioner trying to top up their pension and buy the grandkids something nice for Christmas, those people need to be protected in what is a key worker's role on the front line.
But if you haven't got enough police, the police aren't sure of their powers. Spoke to a copper the other day that had been suspended for the last 18 months on full pay because he dared to be a little aggressive when trying to arrest somebody. He thoroughly deserved it because he was trying to knock 7 bells of out of the officer, right? If you've got that and you've got people, I repeat, Martin Gaunt, who really just wants to protect his... Is it not that society should protect this man? Why do we live in a world now, in my mind, where it's almost as if that crime's acceptable because the people that are doing it know that it won't be dealt with very readily. The punishment isn't actually going to justify what's going on because there'll probably be an excuse. Some left-wing lawyer will get them off. And what that says to hard-working people, Matt, is why am I living my life correctly? Because people who don't, we could talk about so many things in this country, seem to be doing better than me. That's the frustration.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more in that, do you know what? We were seeing more police on the street. We've got to keep doing that. We've got to keep toughening up sentences, although there's a problem with prison places now, but we saw that we were toughening up sentences for some of those horrendous crimes. But the other thing that's happening to that gift shop, to that hard-working individual with his family business, is he's actually getting robbed by the Prime Minister at the moment. He's about to, depending on how many people he employs, he's going to be paying these ridiculous NICS payment. But you know what happened in the budget that people haven't realised yet? Is that we saw changes to the rates relief for leisure, hospitality and retail businesses, for those little small businesses that add all the colour and the magic to the high street, the little family businesses in retail, the community pub, all those businesses had a rate relief of 75%. It's just been slashed to 40%. That's thousands and thousands of pounds from a guy who's trying to pay for all the things he's had nicked. He's trying to create jobs and keep young people in work and give them an opportunity and a handout and a ladder and an opportunity to, make something of themselves. Really tragic, really sad.
Let's talk about him because this is the other big news story of the day. Secret papers seem to imply that a fresh Brussels plot to have Britain surrender our sovereignty once again is happening, fueling fears the government will unpick Brexit. Yesterday we heard that Starmer's latest genius idea is to send a surrender squad of 100 civil servants to Brussels to try and create a closer liaison with Europe. I only ask you this, right? We all know what his motivation is. This is a man in a short space of time has alienated pensioners, he's alienated the armed forces, veterans, he's alienated farmers. Now he's going to alienate all the people who voted to leave the European Union. Does he have a death wish? Is he thick, or is this some sort of plan that I don't understand? Because I don't get this at all.
Well, it's just broken promises from top to bottom. He's doing more to damage people's trust in politicians and in the government and in public life than any individual ever. He lied to the pensioners. He said he wasn't going to remove. He said pensioners were going to be better off. He took that winter fuel payment. I'm sure you're going to give him the opportunity to speak on WASPI, but then you hear the farmers who they actually said.
Tell me, let's talk about WASPI, because this is something people need to know about. We've talked about farmers. Explain to everybody what we've done. What WASPI basically, campaigners have reacted with fury to what it calls the government's unjustified rejection of compensation for women hit by changes to the state pension age. They say 3.6 million women born in the 50s were not properly informed of the rise in state pension age to bring them into line with men. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall apologised for a 28-month delay in sending letters, but has rejected any kind of financial payout. 9 months ago, a parliamentary ombudsman recommended compensation between £1,000 and nearly £3,000 to each of those affected. Labour's thrown this out. Why didn't you lot get this sorted? 28 months? What took so long?
So the biggest problem with the entire thing is it's gone on and on and on, and lots of the people who were victim to it will never get to see that money because lots of them aren't here anymore. And the people who are worst affected is the widow and the person who lives on their own, and therefore this chunk of money is even more big and more seismic to those the most vulnerable. But the thing's gone on. We went to an ombudsman, and ombudsman's came back with a he's found that there was maladministration. He's found that these people should be entitled to compensation. This was earlier this year. The thing's moving on. And the worst of it isn't what people are and aren't getting. It's the fact that it's now all over Twitter. You see pictures of Liz Kendall. You see the video now of Angela Rayner telling people that these women had this money stolen from them and the Labour Party will put it right. What? Another huge broken promise to people desperate. It stinks. It's wrong. So many people back home in my constituency who I speak to about this, frustrated by how long it's gone on, including my mother. But
it's hypocrisy, though. It's hypocrisy by Starmer again, isn't it?
Everything he's done since he arrived has been another broken promise, another lie to a gang of people, often the most vulnerable people, whether that be the pensioners, whether it be those farmers who apparently aren't working people and weren't affected by tax, whether it be that shopkeeper we've just spoken about who's going to be tortured with business rates increases and NIC's contribution increases. Everybody let down, everybody lied to, everybody thoroughly peed off.
Which, again, without wanting to score cheap points, frustrates so many that the incompetence of the last Conservative government led us to a point where these idiots, these mad people, are running the asylum. Because I don't understand. Pensioners, farmers, veterans, WASPI women, everybody that voted for Brexit. I've said it before. I don't know if he has a death wish or whatever, but to me, it's utterly frightening. The Conservative Party, just a final question. Whenever we have you on, delighted to have you on, pal. People will always text straight away and say, I'll never ever vote Tory again because they betrayed us, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. We sit here and we talk about what Starmer is doing, the lies that he's telling, the untruths and all the imbalance in what he believes in. How are you as a party going to even begin to attempt to get the British public back on side? I mean, I haven't heard a lot of meat on the bone from your leader. Maybe that's because she's taking her time. But surely, and you're always willing to come on, surely now is the time for the Tory party to be as vocal as anything, because the Labour Party is floundering. And I'm just being honest, everybody's writing and everybody's talking not about the Tories in opposition, they're talking about reform. They are.
I think, do you know what happened to all those people who voted reform last time? They enabled this huge Labour majority. We've got to listen to that. We've got to listen to the message that people sent us. We've got to listen to why people chose to vote for reform instead of voting for us and come back with a proper package. But what we shouldn't do, as Starmer is finding out the hard way now, is go around promising things that we can't deliver. So we're going to go listen to people, see what their priorities are, engage with people like I do in my constituency every week, hear where they think we should be going next and what we should be offering people. But actually, there's a lot of buyer's remorse out there already. It's not enough. We can't just be... We don't want to come back into office just because the other guys were much worse. We've got to come back with a vision, something we can sell to people about what we're going to do for all those small businesses.
I mean, there's the irony. You were voted out of office because people had had enough, and a Labour Party that offered us very little, and we talked about the Ming Vase approach, and that's true, got in, and everybody now is going, oh, it's really surprising. Really? I was alive in 1979. Is the same thing going to happen, Matt? Are this lot going to be so appalling that you lot will be back in power simply because you're not Labour? You must be concerned about reform. Reform is getting... Well, they're heard. They're heard.
The other problem is that it's always much easier to say something than it is to do it. You can promise whatever until you're... In fact, that's the lesson we've just learned with Keir Starmer. He promises you everything, delivers nothing. And it's very easy for someone else who hasn't been in power to come along and promise lots of things. I think we got lots of things wrong. We've got lots of lessons to learn. But actually, when you look at the economy, record levels of employment. Unemployment now looks like it's going to go through the roof again. You look at growth. We're at the top, highest growth in the G7. All of a sudden, all of the forecasts revised down. Bad news. These people don't know how to run an economy. They don't know how to support businesses, how to support working people, those who go out and create jobs, earn money and put something into the system. In fact, that's the people who've got it in most for.
Really good to have you on, mate. As ever, really appreciate it. Matt Vickers, Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister, Conservative MP.